in the movement. And Prabhupada watched as some of his disciples became infected with doubt. They were young, he reasoned, and could easily be misled by his overbearing or sometimes fanatical God brothers. Problems in paradise. This is the section heading. The unnerving situation was exacerbated. How do you say that? Exacerbated when at the July 1970 San Francisco Rath Yatra, several leading disciples asked Prabhupada not to ride on the Rath Yatra cart, fearing the troublemakers in the area might harm him in some way. He saw that these same disciples rode on the cart themselves, and yet they prevented him from doing it. Were they really concerned for his well-being, or were they trying to replace him, if not consciously, then in some subtle way? Question. At the same time, he took exception to a letter that came from his dear disciple, Tamal Krishna, who asked, just out of philosophical curiosity, if it were possible that Prabhupada had been subjected to the laws of material nature in his previous life. Was this a challenge? Prabhupada replied, a spiritual master is always liberated. In any condition of his life, he should not be mistaken as ordinary human being. So I do not know why you have asked about my previous life, whether I was subjected to the laws of material nature. So, even though accepting that I was subjected to the laws of material nature, does it hamper in my becoming spiritual master? So far my present life is concerned, I do not remember any part of my life when I was forgetful of Krishna. The ultimate blow came in the form of a phone call from Kirtanananda. He told Prabhupada of the upcoming Janmashtami festival in New Vrindavan. And when Prabhupada spoke about making arrangements to attend the celebration, Kirtanananda responded that it wasn't necessary for him to come. As Vyasaki Das writes in his Radha Damodar Vilas, page 273, taking each discrepancy on an individual basis, one might simply see a lack of attention to detail. But judging the events as a whole, these signs are an ominous indication that something is seriously amiss. Prabhupada certainly took it that way. More insult to injury. So Prabhupada's very own ISKCON press had misprinted his name on a new paperback book, even though they had been repeatedly instructed in the matter. They merely referred to him as A.C. Bhaktivedanta, omitting the obligatory, His Divine Grace, and also Swami Prabhupada. And when he opened the book, the binding cracked, causing several pages to fall out. Brahmananda was directly involved in these latter problems. He says, the Brahmananda Prabhu's recollection. There is an incident where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's picture was placed upside down on Prabhupada's personal altar in his room, which in Indian culture symbolizes death. Needless to say, he didn't like that. And once I gave books to him from ISKCON Press and the cover fell off. This was in the temple room. I made a formal presentation. Prabhupada opens the book and it just falls apart. And at the Rath Yatra in 1970, we got word that the Black Panthers said, we're going to assassinate your leader. So we were frightened and we didn't want Prabhupada to participate in the festival. He was stunned. What do you mean, not participate? So we agreed to let him come, but he couldn't ride on the cart in public view. We wanted to protect him. Anyway, he saw some underlying meaning in it all, that we wanted to take his place or undermine his authority in some way. Prabhupada saw all these discrepancies and others as having deep meaning. Another example, in the classes he asked several disciples, are you chanting 16 rounds? And some answered, well, no, but I tried to. And then he asked another one, who's Sanatan Goswami? Nobody knew such basic stuff, and they gave him ridiculous answers. So in the end, Prabhupada said, you see, this is the problem. You are not chanting, not reading. This all led up to an incident in his garden there in Los Angeles, soon after the San Francisco Rath Yatra. One day, we followed him into the garden and he was very upset. That's when he told us that he was leaving the movement. The devotees were stunned. Prabhupada announced that he was dissatisfied with ISKCON and more, that there was a conspiracy against him. So he was going to leave. Leave? How was that possible? He was the movement. There could be no ISKCON without Prabhupada. Consequently, when Brahmananda heard the surreal pronouncement coming from the lips of his guru, he fainted, falling right at Prabhupada's feet. So seeing the vulnerable condition of his disciple, Prabhupada quickly arose from his asana and picked Brahmananda up, gently slapping his cheeks. Wake up. I will not go. I will not go. Brahmananda was pacified and Prabhupada went to his room. The next day, Brahmananda met Prabhupada at the foot of the temple steps just before he entered the garden, as was his habit. When Brahmananda performed the customary obeisance, bowing down at his guru's feet, Prabhupada didn't walk past him as he would usually do. Instead, he just stood there at Brahmananda's head, waiting for him to get up. Finally, as the young disciple arose, Prabhupada unexpectedly uttered the following words: Tridandi Goswami, Brahmananda Swami. Then he walked out. Shocked, Brahmananda realized that this was a portent of things to come. He just made me a sannyasi. I had no choice in the matter. I didn't ask for this. He saw a problem in the movement and he wanted some of us to take sannyas, hoping that this would remedy the situation. Actually, it was Prabhupada's way of purifying me. It wasn't an award of great accomplishment. It was for purification. It was for rectification. He was giving us an opportunity to get control of our senses. It's interesting that when Prabhupada gave me sannyas, he formulated the governing body commission at roughly the same time. And the characteristic was that all the GBC members were grihasthas. The sannyasis weren't to have anything to do with management. The sannyasis were simply meant to travel and preach and set up new centers. Then the grihasthas would bring in men and women to manage it, and then the sannyasi goes into the next place. You see, Prabhupada felt that management was investing too much power in individuals, myself, Gargamuni, and so we became corrupted, weakened by management. We would get spiritually strong by renouncing and preaching. And so it was that later in July of 1970, on the 20th to be exact, Brahmananda and his brother Gargamuni, along with Vishnujan and Subal, took sannyas, the renounced order of life. Brahmananda vividly remembers the formal ceremony, as well as his trepidation and excitement. I was very nervous. This is also new, so final. An abrupt change of service, going off to the unknown, separated and singled out, chastised by being elevated and honored. The sannyas ceremony took place in the old temple room, which is now the museum in Los Angeles. The fire sacrifice was laid out in front of Prabhupada's Vyasasana. Karandar was the officiating priest, and the specifics of the ceremony were organized by Bhavananda. In front of us, lying on trays, were the sannyas clothes, lungi, kurta, top cloth for collecting alms, and kaupins. Slips of paper with the sannyas mantra and translation typed out were there too. Prabhupada spoke and Prabhupada spoke and recited the Avantipura Brahmin verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 23, Text 57. I shall cross over the insurmountable ocean of nescience by being firmly fixed in the service of the lotus feet of Krishna. This was approved by the previous acharyas, who were fixed in firm devotion to the Lord, Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada writes in his commentary, if one accepts the sannyas order, his main business is to devote his life completely to the service of Mukunda Krishna. If one does not completely devote his mind and body to the service of the Lord, he does not actually become a sannyasi. It is not simply a matter of changing dress. In Bhagavad Gita chapter 6 text 1, it is also stated, Anashrita karma phalam karyam karma karotyaha sa sannyasi cha yogi cha. One who works devotedly for the satisfaction of Krishna is a sannyasi. The dress is not sannyas, but the attitude of service to Krishna is. Anyway, this sloka from the Bhagavatam was to be added to the Gayatri mantras. Bhavananda had made new saffron cloth shoulder book bags and a saffron wool blanket for us as well. Under Prabhupada's direction, Devananda made the dandas. On his morning walks along Vatseka Avenue and other neighborhood streets, Prabhupada ingeniously pointed out where clumps of bamboo were growing in people's lawns and gardens. At night, Devananda would sneak in and cut down the bamboos. They had to be of small circumference. There were 4 rods in the Tridanda representing body, mind, and words surrendered to Guru and Krishna. But the Gaudiya Vaishnavas added a 4th representing the Jiva, the soul, as Prabhupada mentions in his commentary to that verse from the Bhagavatam's 11th canto. The bamboo had to be cut to a length, the width of a hand above one's head. Then there was the curved piece that represented the Tridanda as opposed to the Ekadanda of the Mayavadis. The 3 points are the top of the rods and the 2 points of the 3 points are the top of the rods and the 2 points of the curved piece. The curved piece is located adjacent to one's head. The rods and curved piece are tightly wrapped in saffron cloth strips. Srila Prabhupada had to demonstrate how it is done. We had freshly shaved heads, keeping the shika, tuft of hair, which the Mayavadis remove when taking sannyas. The blanket was rolled up and tied with cloth strips and slung over the shoulder. The dandas had heavy cloth coverings. Prabhupada must have lectured at the ceremony, but to my knowledge, there is no recording of it. We had to take the sannyas dress and change in another room and return for the initiation. Some of the women were tearing up. I think for Vishnu Jan, some of the women were tearing up. I think for Vishnu Jan, who was popular in Los Angeles. My danda was a bit too long. The danda should always be carried and not touch the ground and be held erect when prostrating to the deities. This was the first sannyas initiation in America. Previously, Prabhupada had given sannyas to Kirtanananda in Vrindavan, and also in 1970 to Achyutananda and Jayapataka, which is also in India. But this was the first one in the States. After the ceremony, there was a prasadam feast. which we took separately. Sannyasis, sannyas, we were told, was social suicide. No more society, friendship, and love. Total dedication to Krishna without any distractions. No more important manager. The New York temple and the press would have to be taken over. No more important manager. No more important manager. The New York temple and the press would have to be taken over by someone else. I would only travel and spread the message of Krishna consciousness. So off we went, taking a plane to Boston. At the summer of 1970, as the summer of 1970 came to an end, Prabhupada decided that he would save his mission by tightening the reins. In addition to initiating sannyasis, allowing his young students to reflect on the importance of renunciation and forcing them to leave their comfortable services in favor of a more austere frame of mind, he instituted a thoroughgoing morning program, including an early morning Mangalarti ceremony at 4:30 a.m. For many devotees, this would either make them or break them. They had to be serious to follow this new regimen. There would be no time for compromising influences. They were either dedicated to becoming Krishna conscious or they were not. This would separate the wheat from the chaff. In addition, he established his GBC. They could manage his movement while he stayed in India, focusing on translating texts and relishing his inner relationship with Krishna. Meanwhile, the four new sannyasis, Vishnujan, Gargamuni, Subal, and Brahmananda, traveled to various ISKCON centers, feeling out what it means to be in the renounced order of life. They were exhilarated, free, and without any attachments. They were now able to devote full time to meeting people and spreading Lord Chaitanya's teachings. But they were also just learning the philosophy themselves. At most, they had been in the movement for 4 years. So at this point, they were really just deeply inspired neophytes. As a sannyasi, Brahmananda had been given 2 instructions. Prabhupada told him, never think that you're alone. Wherever you are, wherever you go, Krishna will always be with you. And 2, never go where you're not wanted. Those 2 instructions would serve him well in the years to come, and he shared them with the other 3 sannyasis. Okay, Mataji, you could just continue. The next section is called the Prabhupada is God heresy, which we just begun there. Once we finish that section, we'll come back to here. Is it okay?
So shall I continue, Prabhu?
Yeah. Mataji, message came a long time ago. I didn't notice it. Could you read a little slower so that so devotees are requesting so that can absorb the content better?
Sure, Prabhu. I'll do.
Lord, it's very dense actually, this section.
Yeah. Prabhupada observed Janmashtami at his apartment by having disciples read aloud to him from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, throughout the day. If they kept reading, he said, they might be able to finish the book in one day. The devotees had decorated Prabhupada's room with leaves and flowers strung from the ceiling and along the walls, and Prabhupada sat on a thin mattress behind his low desk, hearing the pastimes of Krishna. At 9 p.m., after fasting all day, the devotees were still reading to him when he asked if they would be able to finish the book by midnight. The devotees replied that they would not. Then you stop and I will read. Prabhupada opened a Sanskrit volume of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and for the next 2 hours, he chanted the Sanskrit verses. You cannot understand the Sanskrit, he said, but I know you can feel the verses are so potent that just by hearing one can be purified. During the reading, Kirtananda Swami and Kartikeya Swami cooked a feast in the kitchen. At midnight, the devotees served Srila Prabhupada the Janmashtami feast. Taking only a few bites, he watched his disciples eat heartily. The next day was Vyasa Puja, Prabhupada's 74th birthday, and he went to the Tokyo ISKCON temple. The temple had only two rooms, one for living, one for worshipping, with Japanese grass mats on the floor. Prabhupada sat to the right of the altar, looking at Lord Jagannath, while his disciples sat on the floor before him, singing Purvashtaka, prayers glorifying the spiritual master. None of them, however, knew exactly how to conduct the Vyasa Puja ceremony, and after a while they ended the kirtan. In the painfully awkward moments that followed, the devotees realized they were supposed to do something special. But what? Prabhupada appeared angry. Don't you have Pushpayatra? Isn't Prasadam ready? The devotees looked at one another. This is not Vyasa Puja, Prabhupada said. You've not been to Vyasa Puja before? Don't you know how to celebrate the Vyasa Puja? How to honor the spiritual master? One of the sannyasis began to cry. Kamal Krishna, Prabhupada said. Didn't you see how I observed my Guru Maharaja's birthday? Where is Pushpa? Pushpa is Sanskrit for flowers. Pushpa, Pushpa. Kamal Krishna decided Prabhupada must mean Pushpanna, a fancy rice dish. I am not sure, he said. What kind of Vyas Puja is this with no Pushpa? Prabhupada asked. We can get some, Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna offered. Tamal Krishna grabbed Sudama. Prabhupada wants prasadam. He wants Pushpanna rice. They ran into the kitchen and hurriedly started the rice. Meanwhile, in the temple, the devotees struggled through their version of a Vyasa Puja ceremony. Kirtananda Swami stood and began to read aloud from the introduction of Krishna, the Reservoir of Pleasure, which included a short biography of Prabhupada. But Prabhupada interrupted, scolding his disciples for concocting and acting improperly. If you don't know, he said, then why didn't you ask me how to do this properly? The Japanese guests present didn't understand English, but they could see the spiritual master was disturbed. Prabhupada explained that in devotional service, everything must be done properly according to the Parampara method without concocting. We will observe Vyasa Puja again tomorrow, he said. Come to my room. I will tell you what to do. The next day, after a simple traditional ceremony, the devotees felt ecstatic. Afterward, they agreed when one displeases his spiritual master, there is no happiness. But as soon as the spiritual master is pleased, the disciple becomes blissful. The Janmashtami Vyas Puja festival in New Vrindavan had become a nightmare. Hundreds of devotees had converged there from the East Coast with many others from California and even Europe. They had come for a blissful festival, but instead had found Srila Prabhupada's newly initiated sannyasis expounding a devastating philosophy. The sannyasis, speaking informally to groups here and there, would explain how the devotees had offended Prabhupada and how he had subsequently withdrawn his mercy. The sannyasis revealed their special insights that Prabhupada was actually God, that none of his disciples had recognized him as such, and that all of them, therefore, beginning with the sannyasis, were guilty of minimizing his position. And that was why Prabhupada had left for India. He had withdrawn his mercy from his disciples. The devotees were devastated. None of them knew what to say in reply. The sannyasis, by their preaching, had projected gloom everywhere, which was proper, they said. Everyone should feel guilty and realize that they had lost the grace of their spiritual master. No use trying to cheer one another up by chanting Hare Krishna or eating a feast. Everyone should accept the bitter medicine. Although Prabhupada had given his disciples 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam as well as Bhagavad Gita as it is, Nectar of Devotion, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and other literature, none of the devotees were well versed in them. Many devotees wondered if the philosophy the sannyasis were preaching was correct, but none of them knew enough of the scriptures to immediately refute it. The devotees turned to the new GBC men, Prabhupada's appointed leaders and guardians of ISKCON. The GBC, along with other senior devotees, began carefully searching through Prabhupada's books to ascertain exactly what he had said about the position of the spiritual master. Then Hayagriva announced that a letter had just arrived from Srila Prabhupada in Tokyo. As soon as the devotees all gathered under the pavilion roof to hear, Hayagriva read aloud, "My dear sons and daughters." And then Prabhupada listed almost all the new Vrindavan residents. The devotees immediately felt a wave of hope. Just to hear Prabhupada say, "My dear sons and daughters," was a great relief. Hayagriva continued to read, "Please accept my blessings." Prabhupada hadn't rejected them. The letter went on to say that Srila Prabhupada was pleased with the work of the new Vrindavan devotees and he promised to come and visit them. Soon he would send for other devotees to join him in England. He said, as he described what preaching in India would be like, the devotees became caught up in the momentum of Srila Prabhupada's preaching spirit. They cheered, they felt blissful. Then Prabhupada specifically referred to the difficulty facing ISKCON. Purge out of New Vrindavan the non Vrindavan atmosphere that has entered. His letter turned the tide against the Mayavada teachings. GBC then called a meeting of all disciples in the temple room, reading selections from the Nectar of Devotion. They established that the spiritual master, although not God, should be honored as much as God because he is the confidential servant of God. Several senior devotees spoke their hearts' convictions, citing examples from their association with Prabhupada to prove that he had not rejected them. He was too kind. The sannyasis might feel rejected because of their own guilt. Someone said, but they should not project their guilt on others. The false teachings, however, had dealt a blow from which many devotees would need time to recover. Newcomers at the festival were especially unsettling. But the cloud of gloom that had hung over New Vrindavan now lifted, thanks to Srila Prabhupada's timely letter. The sannyasis admitted their confusion. The GBC then phoned Kirtananda Swami in in Tokyo, and told him that Prabhupada's letter had resolved most of the problems, but that the sannyasis still held their misconceptions. Hearing this, Prabhupada felt his suspicions confirmed. Certain disciples had been contaminated by the poisonous philosophy from India. Consequently, material desires for power and control had overwhelmed them, even in Prabhupada's presence. Turning to Thakur Krishna, Sudama, and the three sannyasis with him, Prabhupada asked what they thought should be done. With the previous day's philosophic drilling still sharp in their minds, they suggested that anyone teaching Mayavada philosophy should not be allowed to stay within ISKCON. Prabhupada agreed. If these sannyasis continue to preach Mayavada philosophy, he said, this message, sorry, if these sannyasis continue to preach Mayavada philosophy, he said, they should not be allowed to stay in his temples, but should go out and preach on their own. Tamal Krishna conveyed this message to the GBC in the US, and Prabhupada was satisfied that the problem would be adjusted. He had created his GBC to handle such matters. September 2nd, Prabhupada wrote Hamsaduta in Germany. Regarding the poisonous effect in our society, it is a fact, and I know where from this poison tree has sprung up and how it affected practically the whole society in a very dangerous form. But it does not matter. Prahlad Maharaj was administered poison, but it did not act. Similarly, Lord Krishna and the Pandavas were administered poison, and it did not act. I think in the same parampara system that the poison administered to our society will not act if some of our students are as good as Prahlad Maharaj. I have therefore given the administrative power to the governing body commission. To Hayagriva in New Vrindavan, Prabhupada wrote, I am very glad to know that the GBC is actively working to rectify the subversive situation which has been weakening the very foundation of our society. All you members of the GBC, please always remain very vigilant in this connection so that our society's growth may go on unimpeded by such poisonous elements. Your preaching in New Vrindavan, as well as intensified study of our literatures with seriousness, is very much encouraging. Please continue this program with vigor and re establish the solidity of our movement. From the beginning, I was strongly against the impersonalists, and all my books stressed on this point. So, my oral instruction as well as my books are all at your service. Now, you GBC, consult them and get a clear and strong idea. Then there will be no more disturbance. The four sannyasis may bark, but still the caravan will pass. Prabhupada wrote Satsvarupa in Boston. I am very glad to know that you are not affected by the propaganda of the sannyasis that I am displeased with all the members of the society. I am never displeased with any member. The worst was over, Prabhupada thought. For months, this problem had upset him and his writing. Relentlessly, he had instructed his disciples for their own benefit and for the benefit of his movement. The disease had taken its toll, and that was unfortunate. But the devotees were being forced to turn to Prabhupada's books and apply their teachings, and that was the positive outcome. Now they should clearly understand the position of the spiritual master and never again be led astray by false philosophies or sentiment.
Thank you, Mataji. I'll just continue to read from this book. The next section is called The Prabhupada is God Heresy. Soon after the sannyas initiation in Los Angeles, there is another one, and others followed. Prabhupada started consciously populating his movement with renunciants, hoping that they and the JBC would manage affairs in his absence. On August 7th, with the new leadership in place, Prabhupada decided to leave for India via Hawaii and Japan and to keep track of the movement from afar. During this period, the newly formed GBC scheduled their first meeting for the upcoming Janmashtami festival in New Vrindavan on August 21st to 23rd. Indeed, Brahmananda and his three comrades would journey to New Vrindavan at the same time, hoping to attend the festivities. But the festival, although a greatly anticipated event for many devotees throughout the movement who travel long distances to get there, would be a dark day in paradise. That is to say, the many anomalies and setbacks the Prabhupada had experienced in recent months would reach its zenith in New Vrindavan. Oddly, it was the four new sannyasis with Brahmananda at the center who were responsible. They openly declared to the many devotees visiting New Vrindavan that they had all offended Prabhupada and that he had returned to India because his disciples had not realized that he was in fact God. This fallacious notion was based on a common misunderstanding in Indian thought that God and Guru are one and the same. In point of fact, the philosophy teaches a sort of oneness in difference. The Guru is one with God in purpose, but never in terms of ontology. The Guru, like all living beings, is eternally a distinct individual. As Krishna confirms in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 12, even if he is the via medium, the personality who links all fortunate souls with the divine. Sad to say, the nuance of oneness and the difference was lost on the new sannyasi, and as a result, they traumatized the movement in New Vrindavan. Vyasaki Das documents Prabhupada's response in his Radha Damodar Vilas, page 312. The GBC men from New Vrindavan finally succeed in reaching his divine grace by phone. When Prabhupada hears about the offensive philosophy being preached in New Vrindavan, he immediately clears away the fog and denounces it for what it is, Mayavada philosophy. In Mayavadi teachings, the idea of all is one predominates. And because of this, adherents view both Guru and God as the same being. And in the end, they see themselves as the same as well. Thus, denying all distinctions between living entities, Mayavadi philosophy proclaims that we are all non-different from God. But this is not Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And to make it clear for his students, Prabhupada often explained it by comparing it to Christian teachings. Just like in Christian philosophy, they say the Father and the Son are the same, is it not? Yes. Similarly, here the Father and the Son, or the spiritual master and God, they are the same. But at the same time, they are not same. It is simultaneous, one and different. I think Christian philosophy is like that. Christ, Son, and God, Holy Ghost, they're Christ, Son, and God, Holy Ghost. They're simultaneously one and different. Is that? So that is the position. While it is a great offense to underestimate the spiritual master, thinking him an ordinary living entity, it is equally inappropriate, or perhaps more so, to raise him to the level of God. Madhudvisha Swami, a senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada, addresses this point in the Radha Damodar Vilas, page 313, where he is quoted as saying, in Japan, Prabhupada said after the New Vrindavan revelations, now it has all come out. They have revealed themselves. They have committed the greatest offense. There is only one thing worse than underestimating the Guru, overestimating the Guru. They have said, I am God. Therefore, if I am God, they also can become God. This is impersonalism. Again, the spiritual master is the vehicle by which one approaches God, and he is empowered by God to act as his emissary in this world. But he is not God. As noted scholar Graham Schweig remarks, the spiritual master is a type of extraordinary confluence of divinity and humanity, as each tradition exalts ways in which the guide becomes directly and effectively the grace of God in the flesh. When it says divinity and humanity, which means that he takes up a human body, but God does not take a human body. That's all is the difference. Of course, qualitatively and quantitatively, there's a difference. Qualitatively same, but not quantitative. Quantitatively, there's a difference. Prabhupada many times stated that the Guru's duty is to serve the Supreme, not to take places with him. The genuine Guru is God's representative, and he speaks about God and nothing else. The genuine Guru is he who has no interest in materialistic life. He is after God and God only. That is one of the tests of a genuine Guru, Brahmanishtam. He is absorbed in the absolute truth. These are Prabhupada's words. In the Mundaka Upanishad, it is stated, Strotriyam Brahmanishtam. The genuine Guru is well versed in the scriptures and Vedic knowledge, and is completely dependent on Brahman. He should know what Brahman is and how to become situated in Brahman. These signs are given in the Vedic literature. As I said before, the real Guru is God's representative. He represents the Supreme Lord, just as a viceroy represents a king. The real Guru will not manufacture anything. Everything he says is in accordance with the scriptures and the previous acharyas. He will not give you a mantra and tell you that you will become God in 6 months. That is not a Guru's business. A Guru's business is to canvass everyone to become a devotee of God. And even more to the point, Prabhupada said, Guru also does not think himself that he is Krishna, but he collects the devotional services of the disciples to offer to Krishna. This is the process. We cannot approach Krishna directly. We should approach through Guru. Tasmad Gurum Prapadyeta Jignashu Shreya Uttamam. Srimad Bhagavatam 11:3-21. That is the injunction of the Shastra, that one should approach the Guru who can transfer the service from the disciple to the Supreme Person. So a Guru, even one of proper stature, is not God. But in Brahmananda's defense, he had reasons for believing as he did. The Srimad Bhagavatam 11:17-27 quotes Krishna as saying, "One should know the Acharya as my very self and never disrespect him in any way. One should not envy him, thinking him an ordinary man, for he is the representative of all the demigods." Furthermore, Brahmananda had received a letter from Prabhupada around the time of his sannyas initiation, highlighting the Guru's exalted status. It is the injunction of the Vedas that the spiritual master should not be treated as ordinary man, even if sometimes the spiritual master behaves like ordinary man. It is the duty of the disciple to accept him as superhuman man. Perhaps Prabhupada wrote this because of the poison infiltrating his movement at the time, or because he wanted to counteract the Western penchant for individualism and exaggerated self-confidence. Whatever the case, he clearly saw it as an offense to take this oneness with God too far, and he took immediate steps to remedy the situation. As far as the incident in New Vrindavan, author Henry Doktorsky summarizes as follows. This heresy was not without due cause. Brahmananda remembered a month or so earlier in Los Angeles when Kirtananda telephoned Prabhupada and indicating something to the effect that it is not necessary for you to attend the Janmashtami festival. As explained earlier, Prabhupada is very hurt and told Brahmananda and others that he intended to abandon his disciples and go to India because his disciples had minimized his position. Brahmananda and Garga Muni were sincere disciples, although perhaps not yet perfectly fixed up in the philosophy, and they took Prabhupada's words to heart. After serious reflection, they devised a solution to save ISKCON. Instead of minimizing Prabhupada, they would maximize him. During their travels, they convinced their fellow sannyasis, Subal and Vishnujan, of the crisis in ISKCON and their solution to save the movement. Prabhupada would not have it. His proclamation was strong and hard. The errant sannyasis were to be temporarily banished from ISKCON. According to Tamal Krishna Goswami, in his article, The Perils of Succession, Heresies of Authority and Continuity in the Hare Krishna Movement. This is a quote from that article by Tamal Krishna Maharaj. The GBC members of the New Vrindavan Festival had already begun to expose the fallacious teachings of the four sannyasis by citing numerous references from Prabhupada's books. But they were surprised by the harsh edict that came from Japan, where Prabhupada was staying at the time on his way to India. Nevertheless, they carried out the order, relaying Prabhupada's instructions that the sannyasis must now preach separately from the institution, depending solely on Krishna for their support. Though penniless and without institutional shelter, the forced independents appeared to strengthen their connection with Prabhupada, and they headed in different directions to carry out his order to preach. Prabhupada's stern response seems to indicate that he was prepared to sacrifice a few individuals to save a society from being seriously infected with what he considered impersonalist poison. He did not, however, reject the errant sannyasis. He had merely quarantined them from other disciples to prevent them from harm to his movement. He continued to correspond with them and encourage them to preach. Gradually, purified by the ordeal, each was eventually incorporated back into ISKCON and went on to perform important service for the society. However, this is the end of the article. Now, Satyaraj Prabhu continuing. However, in the midst of the New Vrindavan debacle, what's a debacle? While Prabhupada was still in Tokyo on his way to India, he wrote to his boys on August 23rd, 1970, especially Brahmananda and Gargamuni, encouraging them in their Krishna consciousness. I am very glad to note that you are now realizing that without executing the regular routine work of spiritual life, nobody can grow spiritual strength. Without spiritual strength, nobody can preach the Krishna consciousness movement. Both of you are my great hopes. You have done great service to the cause of the society, and I always consider you as two strong pillars of the society. Srimad Brahmananda Swami Maharaj joined me in my apartment in New York sometime in 1966. And since then, he's working so hard for upliftment of our activities. And later on, you also joined to help the movement so strenuously. So your service to Krishna in this connection will never go in vain, even though accidentally something contrary has been done. But Prabhupada was clear. But Prabhupada is clear too, at least for now, he wanted them to go. Okay, I think we will stop the reading here. There's I didn't know where to stop and what to say, because there are so many intricate incidents here, all weaved together. So I didn't want to break the flow of the whole thing. And I don't know what to say after this either. It's one of those moments where you're just too awestruck to speak anything. Because, okay, one thing that I did want to say was Prabhupada writes that despite whatever is going on, Prabhupada mentions this point that Prahlad Maharaj is administered poison, but he did not act. So Prabhupada writes, I think in the same Parampara system, that the poison administered to society will not act if some of our students are as good as Prahlad Maharaj. I have therefore given the administrative power to the governing body commission. Anyway, the point there is that Prabhupada is making this point that this is for the future also, that if some of our students are as strong as Prahlad Maharaj, then the poison cannot act. This is one kind of poison, and with passage of Kali Yuga, various kinds of poisons can come into the picture. But if the students of Srila Prabhupada are strong like Prahlad Maharaj, the poison will not act. Okay, I think I don't know what else to say. If there are any thoughts, questions, reflections. I think everybody's silent.
Krishna Prabhuji. What a heavy section. What a heavy section. Yeah, it's heart-wrenching and so instructive at the same time to see the pain Prabhupada had to go through, yet so instructive for everything that may also still be going on at present in the movement. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say, Prabhuji, apart from it's just very, it's very heavy on my heart. So.
Yeah, too many things in this, too many lessons actually. It's very dense. At the same time, I didn't want to stop anywhere because it's all so interlinked, just. At least I think it made us all listen with rapt attention. So we hope that we'll dream of Prabhupada when we sleep tonight.
What was the outcome of the I didn't quite follow the end prognosis of the Los Angeles indiscretions. So Prabhupada left there, but was that remedied, or did he kind of still feel, that Los Angeles had lost its way? And because we hear of the sannyasis going to New Vrindavan and all of the shenanigans that happened there, but we didn't hear what actually ended up, whether there was any resolution of the kind of the indiscretions, or whether Los Angeles had fallen from grace and not recovered, or we didn't hear that part of it. He was very distraught and left there, but I don't remember hearing what happened as a resolution for that.
Okay, from here, what is clear is that from when we read this Brahmananda Prabhu's biography, also it's clear that they had minimized Prabhupada for sure. So because of whatever happened, Achyutananda Swami writing something from India, and the letters circulating throughout the movement. So to make up for that minimization, they came up with this whole Prabhupada is God thing, So they went from one extreme to another extreme. So, however, Prabhupada, they were removed from the movement, and subsequently we'll see they'll come back also. I mean, we got a hint of it from this thing that they'll come back also. So the problem was handled when Prabhupada's letter, when the New Vrindavan devotees heard the letter which Prabhupada wrote, which made it clear to them that he has not rejected them. And so in New Vrindavan, that gloom was lifted. The pall of gloom was lifted by that letter. Nevertheless, the sannyasis still held their misconceptions. So they were expelled from ISKCON. And then they go out and preach, and finally they come back also. So that is how this whole thing was settled, by their expulsion.
Sorry, I may have misphrased my question. I understood that the problem effectively migrated itself into an over emphasization of Prabhupada's position as opposed to undermining him. We were over exaggerated. But so the problem shifted itself to New Vrindavan. But the issue, the kernel of the issue that started in Los Angeles, and Prabhupada said he wanted to leave there, was clearly the indiscretions of those individuals. But did the place itself recover in terms of Los Angeles soon after? Because the problem shifted itself to New Vrindavan, and the Prabhupada's letter resolve that, and sort of the banishing of the removal of the sannyasis from the temple. But did Los Angeles itself recover?
Yeah, my understanding of the situation was that in Los Angeles, it was mainly the problem with the sannyasis, who are not sannyasis at the time, whom he gave sannyas. But meanwhile, when Prabhupada, you noticed, right, when Prabhupada saw the Sankirtan devotees going out in Sankirtan, he said, they are innocent, don't involve them in all this, So I think it was mainly the leaders who had the problem. And Prabhupada fixed that problem by giving them sannyas, whereas the others were not affected. Prabhupada made that remark himself, right? They're innocent. They're all going out in Sankirtan and going on with life.
Okay, I have a secondary question as well, Prabhupada. We hear quite strongly from Srila Prabhupada that his instructions in giving sannyas is that you now give up and relinquish any position and any station as such, and your job is now 100% to be dependent on preaching and moving around permanently. Yeah. Yet we see today in ISKCON, and it's controversial, where this is going, many sannyasis have an HQ, have developed large HQs, have developed their own centers, and are positioned in those centers. They travel, of course, as well, but they're still predominantly based in a particular position or a place with an HQ as such. If you call it an HQ, it's not perhaps the wrong word to use, but you know what I mean.
Could call it base.
So it runs a little counter instructive to what Prabhupada said to these initial sannyasis, and presumably his instructions for all following sannyasis. Am I wrong in reading that?
Okay, two things. One is that Prabhupada, though he formed this GBC, he also disbands them actually later on. And then he forms another GBC. So that time he includes sannyasis also. So it looks like Prabhupada's initial idea of the GBC, where that they would manage. But later on, when Prabhupada disbands and other forms another GBC, including the sannyasis, there he emphasizes the fact that they are supposed to act like shiksha gurus for the movement, So that's one thing about the GBC, how Prabhupada evolved, or Prabhupada, upgraded his concept of a GBC. But as far as sannyasis having a base is concerned, during their younger days, they're expected to continuously travel and preach. But later on, as they age, I mean, it is permissible for them to stay for a longer time in some place where they inspire devotees, not as some private sadhana and all that, but where they inspire and train devotees, simply because of the fact that with time and age, it's difficult to travel as when they were young. But nevertheless, these things have to be done in a manner that is keeping the movement's primary purpose in mind, which is to spread the Krishna conscious movement. We don't have Kshetra Sannyas. Sannyas is not meant for, staying in one place and doing bhajan. That the Babajis are doing anyway. Sannyas by definition was introduced by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur so that they move and preach. So the idea of staying in one place and practicing bhajan is not part of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's scheme or Prabhupada's scheme. So it is more like having a base later on at some point in time is more like to keep up with the to cope with the body's bodily condition, rather than that as a spiritually necessary thing to do.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, my question was less about having a base as such, because clearly as sannyasis get older, traveling is difficult. It's more a question of the creation and attachment, perhaps, that might entail in large centers that they are involved in fundraising, financing, building, and then essentially kind of becoming an HQ, although it's a base, but it actually is HQ for some in reality.
Yeah.
It's a controversial question. I'm sorry, but
no, it's a legitimate question, because sannyasis is generally not supposed to be involved so much in management. They're supposed to be even the role of the governing body, which Prabhupada envisioned, was more like oversight body. Although he calls it the ultimate managerial authority of ISKCON, but nevertheless, it was more like he decentralized the management in the hands of the temple. Their job was more or less to ensure that the accounts are okay, the temple is not going out of line with Prabhupada's teachings, the members are all following. It is more like a supervisory role rather than an executive role. At the same time, I don't say that there is no executive role at all, because Prabhupada did envision some things like the property office, or the executors of his will. They have to ensure that the properties are not sold, for which, of course, now they have all this ISKCON, Global Properties Office, IGPO. But in general, okay, let's say what if somebody becomes errant, or like for this 4 sannyasis had to be expelled. So we could have similar situations today also. But it does not while there is management, it is more like supervisory management rather than a day-to-day executive management. Well, that's a discussion, the whole discussion by itself. But I think you get the sense of what I'm saying, right?
Yes,
There are many.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think other people wanted to ask, so I'll stop now. Thank you, brother.
No, I don't know if anybody else wants to ask something. Anyway, we'll see.
Prabhuji, can I ask one doubt?
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, we saw that Prabhupada left for Tokyo with 3 sannyasis, right?
Yeah.
One of them was Kirtanand Swami, right?
Yeah, correct.
But then he is the one who called from New Vrindavan telling Prabhupada that you need not come. So I was surprised how he went with Prabhupada and how Prabhupada selected him to go.
No, Prabhupada had different strategies. I mean, simultaneously, different things are happening. He wanted one set of people to travel and preach. He wanted another set of people to be with him to where he can directly deal with them also.
So
He
you
did
mean he
both.
was guiding and training even those who went with him, obviously, right? That's the purpose he took
Yeah,
them.
exactly. So, and with the with Brahmananda Prabhu and others, he gave the sannyas so that they don't stay in one place. They just move out and preach. Otherwise, that whole thing can become very
Correct.
messy.
Yeah, I think that was a very good strategy on his part. I mean, excellent strategy.
Prabhu Harishna.
Yeah.
Prabhu, this incident about where the devotees were poisoned because of the Maya philosophy. So Prabhupada was there and can you hear me, Prabhu?
Yes.
I mean, the incident which we read through now, where the devotees were poisoned because of the Mayavadi philosophy, and Prabhupada corrected it. So, just want to understand: is there any incident subsequently which has happened and still continue after Prabhupada left? One which I can think of is this Ritvik philosophy, which is going on in full swing, which is not what Prabhupada thought. Apart from that, is there any other which is going on this way successfully, Prabhu?
What do you mean successfully? I mean,
No, this Ritvik philosophy is going on successfully. I mean, is that Akshaya Patra is going on. I mean, it's one of the famous thing in Karnataka, and people have accepted it. While we have not accepted it, but the public has accepted it. So, likewise, is there any other thing which is going on like this, Prabhu?
Oh, you mean to say something parallel, which is
out of Prabhupada's teachings at all?
No, which is within quote successful. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Quote successful. I mean, there are people who have left Prabhupada's movement and they're doing different things. Like, and today also, apart from ISKCON, Prabhupada paved the way. The Gaudiya Math is also quite. They rode on Prabhupada's wave, as you could say. And in the West, you have a lot of other non-ISKCON Gaudiya Vaishnavas also. I don't know. I don't know if to say a lot or not, but there is significant number of people from other Gaudiya Maths also. They're also preaching and making some devotees these days.
No, I'm saying ISKCON devotees from our who have come from Prabhupada's disciples.
What do you mean Prabhupada disciple? Like, you say you left ISKCON and become successful?
Exactly, like Ritvik philosophy, that Hare Krishna Hill.
Yeah, successful again. I question that word success, but anyway.
No. The reason why I'm saying successfully, not in our eyes, but the public have accepted them. That's why I'm saying.
There are some, but not as successful as ISKCON for sure. But there are some disciples of Prabhupada there. At least one of them I know of. I mean, I've heard of at least. In the West. So,
okay, I'm just curious, no Prabhu. That's it. No problem.
Yeah, but it's not like the most popular is Ritvik only. I mean, Madhu Pandit Das.
Yeah, true.
It's Madhu Pandit and Ritvik. There are many Ritviks, but the only people who do something from among them is Madhu Pandit Das and team from Bangalore.
Somebody was mentioning earlier also in Malaysia, the devotees were stopped to come to the temple. So they had a different philosophy. They never accepted something. I think we discussed this earlier also.
No, that is Siddha Swarupananda. Not from this thing. I mean, they had their own thing. In Prabhupada's time itself, he went away. Not after.
Okay.
They are not very. But you have Tulsi Gabbard, that the Democratic also changed from Democratic Party to Republican, I think. But previously she was Democratic. Her father is a disciple of Siddha Swarupananda.
Okay. Okay. Prabhu.
But you have isolated some isolated success.
Fine.
So
Prabhu.
one more
Thank you.
small point, can I ask?
Yes, Prabhu, yeah.
Prabhu, we saw that, Ketanand Swami traveled with Prabhupada and probably he was brought back in line. But then later on, I believe that he did leave or went aside from ISKCON. So what was the reason? Was it the same reason or something else?
Oh, that our Sailesh Prabhu had asked me to speak, but we'll speak after the session is over because lots more will come.
Okay.
About Kirtan Swami. So after Prabhupada left, yes, he wanted to universalize ISKCON. Let me put it within quotes: universalize ISKCON. So then he installed Jesus also along with Prabhupada in the separate Vyasasana, and then they started wearing robes. Then they started translating the songs into English, and then they started giving names in English instead of Sanskrit, something like that. So you had all these things going on, and eventually, of course, they were expelled from ISKCON in the 87, and there were charges of murder, child abuse, all these kind of charges were there. He got indicted on some charge. I don't remember what charge it was. But yeah, he was removed from ISKCON in 87. Okay, any other questions or thoughts or reflections? I think we'll have one more session where this will be, for some more time. May not be the whole of next class, at least some time.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji.
No, there's nothing to do with this one because today there was no mention of the class or anything. There was no notification. We didn't get the notification today, and I was such a fool that I don't know. I had imagined or speculated. I don't know that there is no class today, so I joined a little bit late today because of that. Somehow the other, then I thought, no, let me just check once, and I just joined with the previous link, and the class was going on. And many of
Rudradeep,
Yes.
who's supposed to send this thing, the notification from Mayapur Institute every week?
Usually it's Ajasvi Prabhu.
Who?
Ajasvi Prabhu.
Okay, I think Prem Goswami Prabhu from MI is here. Prem Goswami Prabhu, you can just keep track of this if they're doing it or not. Because I just
I'll talk to him and ensure it's done every time.
okay.
At least on the same day, if not a day before.
Yeah.
Sure. Because I don't keep track of whether they're posting or not. I just assume it's the same link. So
if we maintain the same link, it's good also. It becomes easy for him also.
Correct. The link is usually the same.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, apologies for this thing. Next time.
It's okay. Because today very less people are there. I think because of that they might have thought also to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, today very less presence today in this one. Many regulars are also not there. That's why. Just I wanted to mention it's okay, Prabhu.
Sure. Okay, so we'll end for today and we'll resume again next week. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyevacha paritanam bhavanebhyo vaishnebhyo namo namah. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gaur